Single mum saves lost girl from biker gang, but she's a millionaire's daughter. And what happens next shocks everyone. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain lashed mercilessly against the asphalt of the bustling city when the single 30-year-old mother emerged from the office building where she worked as a cleaner. Her footsteps echoed through the empty corridor as she carried the heavy cleaning bucket and damp cloths that smelled of disinfectant. The shift had been particularly grueling, with extra offices to clean and restrooms that looked like they hadn't seen soap in weeks. Her hands were rough from constant contact with chemicals, and her shoulders ached from the hunched position she maintained for hours, sweeping and scrubbing the floor. As she walked through the glass doors of the lobby, the icy wind whipped her tired face. She pulled her thin jacket closer to her body, knowing it offered no real protection against the biting cold that penetrated her bones. The bus that would take her home wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes, and she desperately needed to get back to pick up her 4-year-old son from Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor who looked after him while she worked. Money was tighter than ever. The rent on their small apartment had gone up again, and she needed to choose between buying medicine for the boy's persistent cough or paying the overdue electricity bill. Her heavy thoughts were interrupted by a sound that chilled her blood, the desperate crying of a child. Turning her head towards the sound, she spotted a tiny girl sitting on the soaked sidewalk, sobbing uncontrollably. The child couldn't have been more than 4 years old, but her extreme fragility made her seem even younger, almost as if she were only 2. She was dressed in expensive clothes, a pink dress with embroidered details that contrasted starkly with the dirty and dangerous environment of the busy street. Without hesitation, the single mother dropped her cleaning supplies and ran to the girl. She knelt on the wet sidewalk, ignoring how the cold water seeped through her worn jeans. "Hey, sweetie, what are you doing here all alone?" she asked softly, reaching out to the frightened child. The girl raised her tear-stained face, revealing huge, frightened blue eyes. She babbled some unintelligible words between sobs, but managed to point vaguely in the direction of Central Park, which was 3 blocks away. It was then that the deafening roar of engines approached. A biker gang appeared around the corner, their motorcycles making a hellish noise as they sped dangerously down the narrow street. Their faces were covered by dark helmets and masks that made them sinister and threatening figures. The single mother's maternal instinct spoke louder than any rational thought. She wrapped the girl in her arms and tried to move away from the sidewalk, but the masked men had already noticed the movement. One of them signaled to the others, and 2 bikers dismounted their machines with abrupt and violent movements. "What do you think you are doing?" one of them shouted, his voice muffled by the mask, but still full of aggression. "Please, I'm just helping this child," she replied, recoiling with the girl clinging to her neck. "She's lost and scared." The men exchanged glances for a moment that seemed like an eternity. Then, without any warning, one of them advanced and pushed her with brutal force. She tried to protect the child as she fell, but her body slammed violently against the curb. Pain exploded in her back and arms, but she kept the girl safe against her chest. "Stay out of things that don't concern you," the man growled, before returning to his motorcycle. The bikers sped off, leaving only the smell of burning fuel and the echo of their engines fading away. The single mother remained on the ground for a few seconds, trying to catch her breath and assess her injuries. Her left arm throbbed intensely, and she could feel a cut on her forehead where she had hit the concrete. The girl continued to cry in her arms, but now it was a softer cry, as if she recognized that she was safe. With great effort, she managed to get up, ignoring the dizziness that threatened to knock her down again. "It's okay, sweetie," she murmured, stroking the child's golden hair. "Let's find your family." That's when she noticed a small pink backpack lying a few feet away. Staggering, she went to it and opened it, finding some documents inside a plastic envelope. Her hands trembled as she read the child's name and the emergency contact address. The blood seemed to freeze in her veins. The address was of one of the most exclusive mansions in the city, located in the neighborhood where only the wealthiest could afford to live, Upper East Side. The girl's father's name was known throughout the city, the 30-year-old millionaire who controlled one of the largest business empires in the region, heir to a fortune built over generations. With the child still in her injured arms, she managed to stop a passing taxi. The driver hesitated when he saw the state she was in, but the urgency in her voice convinced him to take them to the nearest hospital, New York Presbyterian. Throughout the journey, the girl remained clinging to her, refusing to let go of her dirty work shirt. Between sobs, the child murmured a word that sounded like "mommy," making the single mother's heart clench in a way she couldn't explain. The hospital was bustling when she arrived carrying the girl. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room made her skin look even paler, and the smell of hospital disinfectant mixed with the aroma of old coffee created a tense atmosphere. The receptionist looked suspiciously at the injured woman who was holding a child visibly from a different social class. "I need help," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the pain that radiated throughout her body. "This girl was lost on the street, and I have her documents here." The nurse who approached quickly examined the single mother's injuries, while another employee tried to calm the child, who flatly refused to leave her savior's arms. Each attempt to separate them resulted in desperate screams from the girl, who clung even tighter to the injured woman's neck. "She doesn't want to let you go," the nurse observed with surprise. "It's like you've known each other for a long time." While they were taking care of her superficial injuries, the medical staff had already contacted the emergency number found in the child's documents. The call was answered immediately by someone who seemed to be desperately waiting for news. 30 minutes later, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hospital corridor. The single mother was sitting on a plastic chair, still holding the girl, who had finally stopped crying when an imposing figure appeared at the entrance to the emergency room. The 30-year-old millionaire was even more impressive in person than in the rare photos that appeared in the business newspapers. Tall, with perfectly aligned dark hair and deep blue eyes reminiscent of his daughter's, he wore a suit that cost more than she earned in 6 months. His presence commanded immediate attention, and all the hospital staff moved with a deference she had never witnessed. But what impressed her most was the transformation in his face when he spotted his daughter. All the corporate coolness instantly disappeared, replaced by a raw vulnerability that made her heart clench. He ran to them, and for the first time since arriving at the hospital, the girl stretched her arms out to someone else. "My love, Daddy was so worried," he murmured, hugging his daughter with a delicacy that contrasted with his imposing figure. His hands trembled slightly as he checked to see if she was hurt, and when he saw that she was fine, his eyes turned to the single mother. "You saved her," he said simply, but there was an intensity in his voice that made something strange happen in her stomach. "Anyone would do the same," she replied, trying to get up from the chair and stifling a groan when the pain in her ribs intensified. "No," he said, gently placing his daughter on his lap and approaching her. "Not everyone would risk their own life for an unknown child. Not everyone would face dangerous men to protect someone." The doctor who had treated her injuries approached to explain the situation to the millionaire. She had arrived at the hospital with multiple abrasions, a possible contusion on her ribs, and clear signs of having been assaulted. The girl, on the other hand, showed no injuries, only signs of emotional distress. "How did this happen?" he asked, his tone hardening when the doctor mentioned the assault. The single mother hesitated. Something in his expression made her suspect that telling about the masked bikers could trigger consequences that she couldn't foresee. Instead, she decided to omit the darker details. She was alone on the sidewalk, crying. When I tried to help her, some men passed by on motorcycles, causing confusion. In the middle of the commotion, I ended up falling and getting hurt, but I managed to protect her. He studied her for a long moment, as if he knew there was more to the story. But he didn't press for more information. Instead, he turned his attention to practical matters. "I want to pay all your medical expenses," he said, "and I need to compensate you adequately for what you did." "That's not necessary," she replied quickly. "I was just doing what any mother would do." "Are you a mother?" The question came out before he could stop himself, and she noticed genuine curiosity in his voice. "I have a 4-year-old son," she replied, and saw something change in his expression. The millionaire's daughter, who had remained quiet in her father's lap, suddenly squirmed to look at the single mother. She stretched out her arms towards her again, babbling unintelligible words. "She wants to go back to you," he observed, clearly surprised. "My daughter doesn't usually approach strangers. In fact, since we've been alone, she has difficulty trusting new people." There was a deep sadness in his voice when mentioning being alone, but he didn't elaborate on the subject. Instead, he seemed to make a sudden decision. "I need to make you a proposal," he said. "My daughter has clearly bonded with you, and I'm worried about her. The current nanny can't connect with her the way you have in just a few hours." The single mother looked at him in confusion, not understanding where he was going with this. "I would like you to come work for me as a governess," he continued. "You would take care of my daughter, and in return I would offer a house for you and your son, in addition to a salary that would allow for a much more comfortable life." Silence stretched between them. It was a proposal that would completely change her life and her son's, but something in the intensity of his gaze made her nervous. There was more to this offer than he was saying. She could feel. I need to think," she murmured. "Of course," he said, but his voice carried a poorly disguised urgency. "But please consider it seriously. My daughter needs someone like you." When they finally left the hospital, he insisted on providing a car to take her home. During the silent journey through the city streets, she couldn't stop thinking about the transformation she had seen in that powerful man when he held his daughter. There was something deeply wounded in him, a pain she recognized because she carried a similar one in her own chest. The car stopped in front of her modest building, and she could see in the rearview mirror the expression on his face as he observed the neighborhood where she lived. Hell's Kitchen. There was no judgment in his eyes, just a silent understanding of the struggle she faced daily. That night, as she hugged her own son, who had finally stopped coughing after taking the syrup she had managed to buy, she couldn't get out of her mind the image of the girl crying on the sidewalk and the desperate father who had transformed in front of her. There was something of destiny in that encounter, something that scared her and attracted her at the same time. 3 days later, the single mother found herself in front of the imposing gates of the most impressive mansion she had ever seen. The decision to accept the millionaire's proposal had been made the night before, when her son woke up with a high fever, and she realized that she didn't have enough money even for the taxi to the hospital, let alone the doctor. His offer represented not only a job opportunity, but a chance to give her boy the life she had always dreamed for him. The private driver that the millionaire had sent to pick her up carried her few possessions with a courtesy that made her uncomfortable. She held tightly to her son's hand, who looked with wide eyes at the world of luxury that unfolded before them. The mansion had 3 floors, perfectly manicured gardens, and a marble fountain that functioned in the center of the circular courtyard. The main door opened before she even rang the bell. A 60-year-old woman, elegant and imposing, appeared in the entrance hall. Her grey hair was held in a perfect bun, and she wore clothes that screamed sophistication and money. But it was the icy look she directed at the single mother that immediately put her on alert. "You must be the new employee," the woman said, her voice filled with a cutting coldness. "I am the sister of the owner of this house, and I oversee all domestic aspects while my brother takes care of business." "Nice to meet you," the single mother replied, trying to maintain a respectful tone despite the discomfort she felt. "Let me be clear from the outset," continued the older woman, looking with disdain at the boy who was hiding behind his mother's legs. "This is a serious house with strict rules. You are here exclusively to take care of my niece, nothing more. Any attempt to approach my brother inappropriately will result in immediate dismissal." Before the single mother could respond, hurried footsteps echoed through the marble staircase. The girl she had saved ran down, followed closely by her father. The contrast between the sister's coldness and the child's genuine joy at seeing her was stark. "You came to live with us," exclaimed the girl, running straight into her arms. The millionaire watched the scene with a complex expression. He wore casual clothes for the first time since she had met him, but still exuded natural authority. His eyes lingered on her son, who remained shy behind her legs. "This must be your son," he said, bending down to be at the boy's height. "What's your name, champ?" The boy murmured his name timidly, but his eyes lit up when the millionaire extended his hand to greet him with the seriousness that would be given to an adult. "How about you two go check out the playroom?" he suggested, addressing the children. "There are enough things there to entertain an army." While the children explored the house, guided by a silent employee, he led the single mother through the rooms that would be her new work environment. The mansion was even more impressive inside, with antique furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary when she was still cleaning offices. But there was something melancholy in the atmosphere, a sense of emptiness that all the luxury couldn't disguise. "The house has been very quiet since we've been alone," he said suddenly, as if he had read her thoughts. "My daughter used to laugh a lot, run through the corridors, fill every room with her energy. Now she barely speaks, and when she speaks it's only to me. What happened to your wife?" The question escaped before she could stop herself, and she immediately regretted the audacity. He stopped walking and turned to her. For a moment, she thought he was going to reprimand her for the indiscretion, but instead his expression became even darker. "She left 2 years ago," he said simply. "She decided she didn't want this life, this responsibility anymore. She left a letter saying she needed to find herself and disappeared overnight." There was a deep pain in his voice that made her heart clench. She knew that feeling of abandonment, the feeling of not being enough for someone she loved. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Since then my daughter has nightmares almost every night. She wakes up crying, calling for the mother who never came back. Psychologists say it's normal, that with time she will adapt, but it's been 2 years and nothing has changed. Until yesterday." "Yesterday?" "After you brought her to the hospital, she slept through the night for the first time in months. She woke up smiling, asking when the pretty lady would come visit her again." They continued the tour of the house, and she was introduced to the rooms that she and her son would occupy. They were larger and more luxurious spaces than the entire apartment where they lived before, with private bathrooms and a stunning view of the gardens. During dinner, served in a formal dining room with a table that easily accommodated 20 people, the millionaire's sister maintained a constant monologue about the rules of the house, the strict schedules that should be followed, and the behavioral expectations for all residents. "Especially," she said, casting a meaningful glance at the single mother, "people who weren't born into this environment need to try twice as hard to adapt to the standards of a prestigious family." The millionaire interrupted his sister with a warning look, but the damage was already done. The message had been conveyed clearly. She didn't belong in that world, and any slip-up would be used against her. That first night in the mansion, after the children finally fell asleep in the playroom where they had insisted on sleeping together, she found herself alone in her new quarters. The silence of the big house made her uncomfortable, used as she was to the constant noises of the building where she lived before. That's when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Through the crack in the door, she saw the millionaire walking towards his daughter's room. He was carrying a book of children's stories, and his expression was one of absolute tenderness. She watched him enter the room and heard his soft voice telling a story about brave princesses and kind dragons. 20 minutes later, he left his daughter's room, but instead of returning to his quarters, he stopped in front of her door. He remained there for almost 5 minutes, as if he wanted to knock but couldn't make up his mind. Finally, he continued on his way, leaving her with a racing heart and a strange sense of expectation. The next morning, she would discover that hesitation at her door hadn't been casual. She found an envelope slipped under her door with a handwritten card. "Thank you for returning the joy to my daughter's eyes. I have no idea how to repay this gift." The elegant handwriting and carefully chosen words revealed a side of the millionaire that she didn't expect to find. But it was while exploring the house during the day, while the children played in the garden, that she made a disturbing discovery. In a half-open drawer of the study, she found photographs of the missing wife. The woman was stunning, elegant, clearly born into the same world of privilege as him. But what chilled her was noticing the physical resemblance between herself and the wife. The same height, the same brown hair, the same delicate facial structure. The coincidence was too disturbing to be ignored, and for the first time since accepting the proposal, she wondered if she had been chosen for her qualities as a caregiver or for resembling someone he had lost. 8 months had passed since the single mother had moved into the mansion, and the lives of the 2 children had been completely transformed. Her son, who previously coughed constantly due to the poor conditions where they lived in Hell's Kitchen, now ran through the gardens with vibrant health. The millionaire's daughter had recovered her natural joy, filling the house with laughter that had long not echoed through the marble corridors. But it was during a winter afternoon, while organizing the office documents as she had been asked, that she made a discovery that would change everything. Hidden behind a pile of financial reports, she found a folder containing letters and receipts that made her blood run cold. The letters were from the millionaire's sister to third parties, coordinating payments for intimidation services and removal of unwanted individuals. With trembling hands, she read each document. There were receipts for payments made to a private security company, with descriptions that mentioned bikers for deterrent actions. The last payment had been made exactly 3 days before the day she found the girl on the street. The truth was revealed like a punch to the gut. The gang that had attacked her hadn't been there by chance. They had been hired to intimidate any woman who approached the millionaire. But the plan had gone completely out of control when she appeared protecting the child. His sister had orchestrated everything to keep other women away from her family fortune. But there was more. Other letters revealed that the millionaire's wife hadn't left of her own accord. His sister had blackmailed her, threatening to destroy her family's reputation and financially ruin her elderly parents unless she disappeared. The woman had been forced to choose between her love and the safety of her family. Her hands trembled so much that she almost dropped the letters when she heard footsteps approaching the office. Quickly, she put the documents back where she had found them and pretended to be organizing other papers when the millionaire's sister entered the room. "What are you doing here?" asked the older woman, her voice filled with suspicion. "Your brother asked me to organize the financial documents for the last quarter," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The millionaire's sister approached and examined the papers she was handling. For a moment her eyes fixed on the folder where the incriminating letters were hidden, and a flash of concern crossed her expression. "Finish quickly and leave," she said abruptly. "And remember, excessive curiosity can be very dangerous in this house." The veiled threat was clear, but it also confirmed the single mother's suspicions. She wasn't just an inconvenient employee, she was a potential witness to crimes that could destroy the entire family. That night, after the children fell asleep, she found herself in the garden trying to process everything she had discovered. The millionaire found her there, sitting on the stone bench where she used to take the children to sunbathe. "You seem worried," he said, sitting down next to her. Did something happen? In the months they had lived together, a silent intimacy had grown between them. Long conversations over breakfast, glances that lasted longer than they should, moments when their hands touched accidentally and neither of them immediately pulled away. She had fallen in love with him slowly, against all her instincts of self-preservation. I need to tell you something, she said, making the riskiest decision of her life. But you need to promise me that you'll listen to me until the end. For the next hour, she told him everything. The true details of the biker gang attack, the letters she had found, the discoveries about the blackmail against his wife. She watched his expressions change from confusion to anger, then to a deep pain that broke her heart. "My sister," he murmured, running his hands through his hair. "I always knew she was controlling, but this is monstrous." "There's more," she said softly. "The letters mention other incidents. Your wife wasn't the first. Your sister has been doing this for years, pushing away any woman she considers a threat to the control she exerts over you and your fortune." He got up abruptly and began to walk around the garden like a caged animal. The anger emanated from him in almost tangible waves. "All these years," he said, his voice breaking, "all these years I believed that she had abandoned me because I wasn't strong enough, because our life wasn't enough. And all the time, you couldn't have known," she said, approaching him. "Your sister is very smart. She covered her tracks well. And you," he said, turning to face her, "you're also in danger now. If she finds out that you know—" "She already has," she admitted. "Today, in the office, she threatened me indirectly." Silence stretched between them, charged with a tension that had been growing for months. Finally, he approached and gently touched her face. "I've fallen in love with you," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I tried to fight it, I tried to keep my distance, but you brought life back into this house, to my daughter, to me. And now you know it wasn't a coincidence," she said, leaning into his hand. "Maybe your sister chose me because I remind you of your wife. Maybe you only feel this because—" He interrupted her with a kiss that contained months of repressed feelings. When they parted, his eyes shone with a determination she had never seen. "No," he said firmly, "what I feel for you has nothing to do with her. You're brave, strong, dedicated. You risked your life for an unknown child. You brought joy to my daughter when nothing else could reach her. You are you, not a substitute." The next morning he confronted his sister. The single mother watched from afar through the window of the children's room as the two argued intensely in the garden. She could see the older woman gesturing dramatically, then assuming a defensive posture, finally collapsing in tears. When he came up to meet her, he brought with him a resolution that would transform their lives forever. "I spoke with my sister," he said. "She admitted everything. The bikers, the blackmail, the years of manipulation. She's agreeing to step away from the business and our personal life." "What about your wife?" she asked hesitantly. "I'm going to look for her," he said. "Not to rekindle the relationship, but to apologize for what she suffered. She deserves to know the truth." 3 months later, life had found a new balance. The millionaire's sister had moved to a smaller house in the city, retaining only a small stake in the family business. His wife had been found living a simple life in a small town, and although she had accepted his apologies, she made it clear that she had moved on and built a new life. It was on a spring afternoon, with the 2 children playing in the garden that had truly become a home, that he asked the question that would change everything. "Marry me," he said, kneeling before her with a simple but beautiful ring. "Not because you saved my daughter, not because she needs a mother, but because I can't imagine my life without you." The ceremony was small, just the 4 of them, and a few close friends. There was no excessive luxury or demonstrations of wealth. It was a celebration of the love that had grown amidst adversity, of the family they had built with patience and dedication. As they danced in the garden where so many important conversations had taken place, she looked at the two children who were now siblings at heart, then at the man who had chosen love over social conventions. She had found not only financial security, but a family that accepted her completely. Love had triumphed over all the manipulations, all the prejudices, all the attempts to separate two worlds that seemed incompatible. And at that moment, dancing under the stars with the man she loved, and watching the children run freely and happily through the garden, she knew that sometimes happy endings really do happen for those who have enough courage to fight for them. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment, giving a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.